Hello and welcome to 100 Pokemon Facts to Fall Asleep To. I know you like to relax to these videos, so I just want you to comment about what your favorite thing about Pokemon is. Don't forget to like and subscribe and prepare to relax. Now we begin. Pokemon began development in the early 1990s, at a time when Game Freak was still a very small group transitioning from a self-published gaming magazine into an actual development studio. The company had little financial stability and no guarantee of success. The project that would eventually become Pokemon Red and Green took nearly 6 years to complete, which was unusually long for a Game Boy title. During this period, the team struggled to secure funding, and several developers continued working without pay simply because they believed in the concept. The core idea behind Pokemon was inspired by childhood exploration. The creator wanted to recreate the feeling of discovering small creatures in nature and sharing those discoveries with others. This philosophy directly shaped the game's structure. The name Pokemon is short for pocket monsters, reflecting the idea of carrying living creatures with you as companions rather than tools. One of the most important influences on Pokemon's design was the Game Boy Link cable. Instead of treating it as a technical novelty, the developers built an entire social system around it. Trading Pokemon was intentionally made essential, not optional. The Pokes was designed so that no single player could complete it alone. From the very beginning, Pokemon was structured to require cooperation and interaction between people. The original Pokes contained exactly 151 Pokemon, not because that number was carefully planned, but because of strict memory limits. Game Boy cartridges had extremely limited storage, forcing developers to compress sprites, cries, and internal data. Many Pokemon share internal structures as a result. Some well-known glitches from the early games exist specifically because of aggressive memory optimization rather than design intent. Raiden was the first Pokemon ever designed. Because it existed early in development, many other Pokemon were modeled using similar proportions or animation structures. Bulbasaur was placed first in the Pokes because it provided a balanced introduction to game mechanics, combining type interactions, status moves, and evolution in a single Pokemon. This decision helped new players learn multiple systems at once. Pikachu was not originally intended to be the franchise mascot. It became the face of Pokemon after market testing showed its design appealed broadly across age groups and cultures. Its rounded shape, simple facial features, and neutral color palette made it easy to recognize even for people unfamiliar with the games. Mew was added to Pokemon Red and Green near the end of development using leftover memory space. Only one programmer initially knew it existed. This secrecy was accidental, but it led to widespread rumors and playground myths. Players shared stories about hidden trucks, secret items, and mysterious glitches, which fueled curiosity and discussion in a way no marketing campaign could have achieved. Pokemon battles were designed as turn-based encounters to emphasize planning over reflexes. This choice made the game accessible to players of all ages and skill levels. Beneath the simple battle interface lies a layered statistical system. Each Pokemon species has base stats that determine long-term potential. These base values ensure that species feel distinct even at the same level. Individual values were introduced to make each Pokemon unique. Two Pokemon of the same species can have different hidden stat potential, encouraging players to train and experiment rather than relying on a single capture. Effort values further expanded this idea by allowing players to influence stat growth through training choices rather than simple leveling. Early generations contained significant balance issues. In the first games, Psychic-type Pokemon were overwhelmingly powerful due to several programming oversights. Ghost-type moves did not function as intended, and Dark-type Pokemon did not yet exist. As a result, Psychic Pokemon had very few effective counters. This imbalance directly influenced the design of Generation 2, which introduced Dark and Steel types to correct these problems. Evolution in Pokemon is not meant to represent real biological processes. Instead, it functions as a gameplay abstraction that represents growth, mastery, or adaptation. This allowed developers to create a sense of progression without constantly increasing the number of Pokemon species. Evolution also provided emotional milestones for players as they watched their Pokemon change over time. Trade evolutions were created to reinforce Pokemon's social identity. By requiring players to trade Pokemon in order to evolve certain species, the game encouraged communication and cooperation. While this mechanic can be inconvenient for solo players, it reflects the original philosophy that Pokemon is meant to be shared. Breeding mechanics were introduced in Generation 2 to provide long-term goals beyond completing the main story. Egg Group simplified compatibility rules, making the system approachable without relying on real-world biology. Inherited moves and stats rewarded patience and planning, allowing players to gradually refine Pokemon over time. Ditto was given near-universal breeding compatibility to support this system. Legendary Pokemon, however, were excluded from breeding to preserve their rarity and narrative importance. These restrictions help maintain balance while reinforcing the special status of certain Pokemon. Shiny Pokemon were introduced as rare color variations to encourage exploration and replayability. Their extremely low encounter rate created a sense of excitement and emotional attachment without affecting competitive balance. Because shiny Pokemon offer no statistical advantage, they exist purely as a personal reward. Pokemon regions are modeled after real-world locations to make exploration feel grounded. Designers consider geography, climate, and cultural influences when deciding which Pokemon appear in each area. This approach helps environments feel cohesive rather than random. Regional forms were later introduced as a solution to an ever-growing Pokes. Instead of constantly adding new species, existing Pokemon could be reimagined with different typings and abilities based on their environment. This preserved familiarity while refreshing gameplay. Legendary Pokemon are typically given higher base stat totals to reflect rarity, but they are often restricted in competitive formats. These limitations preserve strategic diversity rather than allowing raw power to dominate play. Mythical Pokemon differ primarily in how they are distributed. They are usually unavailable through normal gameplay and are instead released through special events. This method preserves mystery and encourages community engagement. Abilities were introduced in Generation 3 as a way to add depth to battles without increasing the number of actions a player needed to take. Rather than requiring additional menu choices, abilities function passively, influencing battles in subtle but meaningful ways. Some abilities activate when a Pokemon enters battle, others respond to specific conditions such as low health, weather, or type interactions. This design rewards awareness and timing rather than speed. Weather mechanics expanded this idea by introducing persistent environmental effects. Rain, sunlight, sandstorms, and hail alter move power, activate certain abilities, and affect survivability. Weather conditions last for multiple turns, meaning decisions made early in a battle can have lasting consequences. Over time, abilities and items were added specifically to counter weather, ensuring no single strategy could dominate. Terrain effects were later introduced as a more localized environmental system. Unlike weather, terrain only affects grounded Pokemon, allowing for more precise strategic control. Electric, grassy, psychic, and misty terrain each influence move behavior and status effects, adding complexity while preserving counterplay through switching and abilities. Pokemon move design balances several variables at once. Power, accuracy, PP, and secondary effects are carefully adjusted so that no move is strictly superior to all others. High damage moves often have lower accuracy or limited PP, while weaker moves may apply status conditions or alter stats. This balance encourages variety and prevents repetitive strategies. Originally, whether a move was physical or special depended entirely on its type. All fire-type moves were special, and all fighting-type moves were physical, regardless of animation or intent. This system created inconsistencies and limited design flexibility. In Generation 4, the physical and special split was redesigned so each move could function independently, significantly improving clarity and balance. Natures were introduced to subtly differentiate Pokemon further. Each nature increases one stat while decreasing another, allowing for customization without overwhelming complexity. This system works quietly in the background, benefiting players who seek optimization while remaining invisible to those who do not. Pokemon species also follow different experience growth rates. Some level up quickly early on but scale poorly, while others require more experience yet offer stronger long-term potential. These curves influence pacing and encourage players to think about investment rather than immediate power. Friendship mechanics were designed to reward consistent care rather than raw battle usage. Actions such as walking, leveling, and avoiding fainting increase friendship, while neglect or bitter items decrease it. Some Pokémon evolve only through high friendship, reinforcing emotional attachment and patience. Status conditions serve as tools for tempo control rather than pure damage. Paralysis reduces speed and occasionally prevents action, sleep removes turns entirely, poison applies steady pressure, and burn weakens physical attackers. These effects introduce uncertainty and force adaptation. Critical hits have evolved significantly over time. Early generations had very high critical hit rates tied to speed, which made battles unpredictable. Later revisions reduced randomness and adjusted mechanics so critical hits ignore certain stat changes, preventing overly defensive strategies from stalling indefinitely. Hidden Power was created as a flexible move whose type depended on a Pokémon's individual values. This allowed otherwise limited Pokémon to gain coverage options while subtly rewarding players who understood deeper mechanics. It also encouraged experimentation rather than fixed builds. Technical machines and hidden machines controlled access to powerful or utility moves. While TMs allowed customization, HMS forced players to consider exploration requirements. Over time, HMS were removed in favor of convenience systems after developers recognized their restrictive impact on team creativity. Double and multi-battles expanded tactical depth by introducing positioning, synergy, and target selection. These formats encourage coordination between Pokémon and highlight support moves that are less effective in single battles. Switching Pokémon during battle is one of the most strategically important mechanics in the series. The ability to freely change active Pokémon introduces prediction, counterplay, and long-term planning. Battles become about managing momentum rather than simple damage exchanges. Entry hazards were introduced to give switching meaningful consequences. Moves like Spikes and Stealth Rock punish careless rotations and reward strategic positioning. These mechanics turn the battlefield into a space that evolves gradually rather than remaining static. Type effectiveness charts are designed to be intuitive. While complex at first glance, most interactions follow familiar elemental logic. Immunities are used sparingly to create clear stopping points that force players to rethink their approach. Pokémon hit point values are intentionally higher than average damage output. This design ensures battles last long enough for decisions to matter. Short battles would remove strategy, while excessively long battles would become tedious. Priority moves were introduced to give slower Pokémon tactical options. By allowing certain moves to act before faster opponents, priority mechanics prevent speed from becoming an overwhelming advantage. Additional mechanics like Trick Room further balance turn order. Held items expanded battle depth without increasing menu usage. Passive effects allow Pokémon to influence battles continuously, while single-use items create meaningful timing decisions. This system improved flow and reduced interruption. Pokémon capture mechanics reward patience rather than speed. Lowering health, applying status conditions, and choosing the appropriate Pokeball dramatically increase success rates. Capture rates vary by species to reinforce rarity beyond appearance. Different Pokeballs were introduced to encourage situational awareness. Some function better at night, others underwater or against higher-level Pokémon. These choices turn capturing into a deliberate process rather than a repeated action. Pokémon storage systems were designed to eliminate punishment for collecting. By allowing players to store large numbers of Pokémon safely, the game encourages experimentation and emotional attachment without risk. Evolution methods and levels are carefully chosen to control pacing. Early evolutions teach progression, while late evolutions reward patience and long-term commitment. Item-based evolutions introduce timing decisions rather than automatic growth. Pokémon evolutions are irreversible by default to preserve the weight of player choice. Move relearners were later added to reduce punishment for experimentation, allowing flexibility without removing consequence entirely. The Pokes is intentionally difficult to complete casually. Its size and distribution encourage long-term engagement across multiple playthroughs, games, and trades. Completion is framed as a personal goal rather than an expectation. The anime has played a significant role in shaping public perception of Pokémon species. Many Pokémon became popular due to personality portrayal rather than in-game strength, influencing later design decisions. Ash Ketchum remains 10 years old to maintain accessibility. By keeping the protagonist static, new viewers can enter the series at any point without needing narrative context. Pokémon cries evolved from simple sound chip manipulations into expressive audio. Larger Pokémon gained deeper sounds, while smaller ones received higher-pitched cries, reinforcing identity without dialogue. Difficulty in Pokémon games is largely self-regulated. Players can increase challenge through team composition, limited item use, or self-imposed rules. This flexibility removes the need for explicit difficulty settings. Artificial intelligence opponents are designed to be readable rather than optimal. Predictable behavior allows players to learn patterns, improve gradually, and feel rewarded for understanding mechanics. Experience sharing systems evolved to reduce repetitive grinding. By distributing experience across teams, later games accommodate modern pacing expectations while preserving optional depth. Pokémon's core design philosophy prioritizes clarity over realism. Systems are simplified so outcomes feel intuitive, even when the underlying mechanics are complex. Across generations, Pokémon remains consistent by design. While features evolve, the foundational structure stays familiar to avoid alienating long-term players. The series supports many play styles equally well. Players can focus on collecting, battling, trading, exploration, competitive play, or personal challenges without being forced into a single path. This layered flexibility is the primary reason Pokémon has endured for decades, remaining welcoming, deep, familiar, and calming, allowing players to engage at their own pace and return comfortably whenever they choose. Pokémon music is composed with long listening in mind. Rather than sharp melodies that demand attention, most tracks use gentle loops, steady tempos, and repeating motifs. This design allows players to remain in an area for extended periods without experiencing fatigue. Route themes often emphasize movement and openness, while town music tends to be slower and more reassuring, reinforcing the sense of safety. Battle music contrasts this calm structure by using faster rhythms and stronger melodic hooks. Even then, tracks are designed to loop smoothly so that battles of varying lengths feel cohesive rather than abrupt. Legendary battle themes often introduce heavier instrumentation or unusual harmonies to signal importance without overwhelming the listener. Sound design in Pokémon avoids realism in favor of clarity. Audio cues for attacks, menu navigation, and notifications are intentionally simple. This ensures players always understand what is happening without needing to interpret complex soundscapes. The clarity of audio feedback contributes to the series' accessibility. Pokémon environments are built around gradual discovery. Routes curve, branch, and subtly guide movement using natural obstacles like trees, cliffs, and water. Rather than explicit direction, the games rely on environmental language that gently encourages exploration without pressure. Dungeons and caves are structured to create mild disorientation without frustration. Repeating tiles and looping paths slow progress and encourage attention, while exits and landmarks are placed carefully to prevent players from feeling truly lost. This balance creates tension without anxiety. City layouts reflect function. Larger cities feature multiple entrances, public buildings, and varied NPC activity, while smaller towns are compact and easy to navigate. This helps players intuitively understand their role in the world without exposition. NPC dialogue is intentionally concise. Most characters communicate a single idea, hint, or emotional tone rather than extended conversation. This design keeps pacing relaxed and avoids cognitive overload, especially during long play sessions. The Pokémon world rarely acknowledges real-world time pressure. There are few hard deadlines, and most events can be revisited later. This absence of urgency allows players to engage at their own pace, contributing to the series' calming quality. Day and night cycles were introduced to reinforce immersion. Certain Pokémon appear only at specific times, encouraging players to revisit familiar areas under different conditions. This mechanic makes the world feel alive without requiring constant attention. Seasonal systems in later games expanded this idea. Changes in weather, available Pokémon, and music subtly shift the atmosphere over time. These variations add depth while preserving familiarity. Side activities provide contrast to core gameplay. Contests, minigames, and facilities offer alternative goals that focus on creativity or precision rather than combat. These diversions allow players to engage without stress. Pokémon contests emphasize visual appeal, move coordination, and rhythm rather than raw stats. This creates a different kind of mastery that rewards understanding of presentation and timing. Facilities like the Battle Tower exist for players seeking structure and challenge. These spaces isolate difficulty, allowing the main adventure to remain approachable while still offering depth for experienced players. Competitive Pokémon emerged organically rather than by initial design. Players began organizing battles and tournaments, prompting developers to support competitive play through clearer mechanics, standardized rules, and online connectivity. Online features evolved cautiously. Trading and battling were introduced in ways that preserved the series' cooperative identity rather than shifting toward constant competition. Pokémon designs follow strict internal rules. Silhouettes must be recognizable even without detail. Color palettes are chosen for contrast and clarity. Facial features are simplified so expressions read clearly even on small screens. Evolution lines are designed to communicate growth. Shapes become more defined, proportions change, and design motifs evolve while preserving identity. This visual continuity reinforces emotional connection. Legendary Pokémon often break standard design rules intentionally. Asymmetry, unusual color schemes, or abstract forms signal that they exist outside normal ecosystems. These choices create a sense of mystery without explanation. Mythical Pokémon are designed to feel rare and gentle rather than powerful. Many have soft colors, small sizes, or whimsical traits, reinforcing their role as secrets rather than trophies. Pokémon size and weight values are intentionally inconsistent. These numbers exist primarily for flavor rather than simulation. This allows designers freedom without needing to justify every interaction. Pokémon behavior is implied rather than shown. Poke's entries hint at habits, migration patterns, or temperament, allowing players to imagine rather than observe directly. This approach encourages quiet reflection. The Pokes itself is written from an in-world perspective, often exaggerating or mythologizing behavior. This unreliable narration adds charm and mystery rather than strict accuracy. Professor characters serve as anchors of trust. They introduce systems, provide guidance, and represent curiosity rather than authority. Their role reinforces learning as exploration rather than obligation. Rival characters vary in temperament to reflect different play styles. Some prioritize strength, others strategy or collection. These differences mirror player approaches without enforcing a single path. Gym leaders act as regional specialists rather than simple obstacles. Their theme teams teach mechanics gradually, preparing players for more complex interactions later. Elite for structures provide emotional closure rather than mechanical escalation. Battles are challenging but symbolic, marking completion rather than demanding perfection. Champion battles focus on identity. Champions often use balanced teams and adaptive strategies, representing mastery rather than specialization. Post-game content extends the world rather than escalating difficulty endlessly. Additional areas, story fragments, and encounters reward curiosity rather than skill alone. Remakes are treated as preservation rather than replacement. Improvements focus on usability and clarity while maintaining original pacing and structure. Spin-off games explore different genres without altering the core series. This separation protects the main experience while allowing creative experimentation. Pokémon's longevity comes from restraint. Features are added carefully, removed when necessary, and refined over time rather than accumulating endlessly. This deliberate evolution keeps the experience familiar yet fresh, allowing players to return repeatedly without feeling overwhelmed, and to remain within the world comfortably for as long as they choose. Pokémon storytelling avoids heavy exposition in favor of implication. Major events often occur in the background, hinted at through dialogue or environmental change rather than direct scenes. This restraint keeps the focus on the player's journey rather than forcing attention onto a central narrative. Villain teams are designed less as moral extremes and more as disruptions to balance. Their goals often stem from exaggerated ideals rather than pure malice, reinforcing the theme that imbalance, rather than evil, creates conflict. Their presence adds tension without dominating the experience. Environmental storytelling plays a subtle role. Abandoned buildings, altered routes, and changed NPC behavior quietly reflect past events. These details reward observation without demanding interpretation. Pokémon rarely depicts permanent failure. Even setbacks are reversible, reinforcing a sense of safety. This design choice allows players to experiment freely without fear of lasting consequences. Fast travel systems were added to respect player time. By reducing unnecessary backtracking, they preserve immersion and reduce fatigue during longer play sessions. Inventory systems evolved to remove clutter and friction. Key items are separated, sorting is automated, and storage limits are generous. These changes keep focus on exploration rather than management. Visual design prioritizes readability over realism. Colors are chosen for contrast, outlines remain clear, and animations are intentionally expressive. This ensures information is conveyed quickly and comfortably. Camera perspectives remain consistent to prevent disorientation. Even in three-dimensional environments, the view is controlled to maintain clarity and reduce motion fatigue. Pokémon animation emphasizes anticipation and follow-through rather than speed. Movements feel deliberate, giving battles a rhythmic quality rather than a chaotic one. Idle animations give Pokémon a sense of presence without distraction. Subtle breathing, shifting weight, or blinking reinforces life while remaining unobtrusive. Pokémon rarely speak in language, relying instead on sound and motion. This allows players to project personality rather than receive it explicitly, deepening attachment. Customization features allow self-expression without affecting gameplay balance. Clothing, appearance, and cosmetic choices exist purely for comfort and identity. Accessibility considerations have steadily improved. Colorblind options, simplified controls, and clearer tutorials reduce barriers without altering core mechanics. Pokémon avoid sensory overload. Screens are uncluttered, effects are readable, and audio layers are limited. This creates a calm cognitive environment even during active play. Menus are designed to be navigated quickly and repeatedly. Muscle memory develops naturally, reducing mental effort over time. The pacing of Pokémon games intentionally alternates between activity and rest. Routes lead to towns, challenges lead to healing, and intensity is followed by calm. Healing mechanics reinforce this rhythm. Pokémon centers act as predictable safe spaces, both mechanically and emotionally. The repetition of healing, traveling, and battling creates a meditative loop. Over time, this loop becomes familiar and grounding. Pokémon names are chosen for phonetic softness and memorability. Even unfamiliar species often sound gentle or playful when spoken aloud. Localization teams carefully adapt names and dialogue to preserve tone across languages, ensuring emotional consistency worldwide. Pokémon rarely forces attention through shock or urgency. Instead, it invites presence through familiarity. Long-term fans often return not for novelty, but for comfort. Familiar systems, sounds, and patterns create a sense of return rather than progression. Each generation builds upon memory. Players recognize mechanics intuitively, allowing them to relax into the experience quickly. The world of Pokémon exists in a perpetual state of readiness. It waits for the player without pressure. This waiting quality is central to its calming effect. Nothing advances unless the player chooses to move forward. Even competition remains optional. One can engage deeply or ignore it entirely without penalty. The absence of punishment encourages curiosity. Mistakes become information rather than failure. Over time, Pokémon becomes less about goals and more about presence. Walking, listening, observing, and collecting blend together. This gentle structure makes the series uniquely suited to long, uninterrupted engagement. As the systems fade into familiarity, attention softens. Thoughts slow, patterns repeat, and the experience becomes steady. There is no need to rush. The world remains open. The journey continues quietly. And whenever attention drifts, the path is still there, waiting patiently, unchanged, and calm.